Hello, our guest today is Selectman Bill Buckley, who is in the ending the first year of his last 3 years on the board, as you've decided not to run again. Is that kind of bittersweet, knowing you're going to give something up?
No, I think for me, it's about new challenges, right? So I don't look at it as giving something up as much as taking new things on.
What's the new things you're going to take on? And by the way, welcome.
Thank you, thank you. Well, certainly there's a lot of challenges at work. I'm taking on new work.
Oh, that's right.
Work assignments and changing, doing a little bit more traveling, new locations.
Oh, really?
Managing a team, so yeah.
Is it baseball or softball?
Softball.
Oh, softball team. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Are you the owner of the team, or are you just? That's good. So you're having fun at work.
I am, and I have 2 grandchildren I like to spend time with, and you know, I think when I look at school committee, when I think of Board of Selectmen, both of you know you've served in Board of Selectmen, that it's certainly time challenge. And when I look back, and think
how many years have you been an elected official now?
I've been 15 as a member of the Board of Selectmen.
Wow.
You know, when I think about the time.
And what was it, 6 or 9 at the school committee?
No, it was 3 at the school committee.
Oh,
so
okay.
you've 18 years. A public servant,
So
elected.
Plenty of time. That's why I don't feel like I'm leaving anything behind.
No, I don't think so. No.
No, I kid you. I know I saw you over the past week at Socially and said, "Are you going to miss it?" You said no.
Well, I think you know, what I won't miss is the time away from family. I'll get an opportunity to spend more time with family, because you know that doing this, you sacrifice the one thing you sacrifice is time with family, for sure.
Right.
Oh, without question.
Yeah.
When I was on the school committee, that was terrible. 18 years. That's congratulations.
So it's a good thing. It's rewarding. You get to see your initiatives and the things that you're thinking about and the things that constituents talk about become real.
Right.
But you know, there's the challenges.
Let's talk about some of those. We had your colleague and chairman, Will Kincaid, on the last episode, and we know the water company is not going to close until sometime in 18, as the legal process, and negotiations work out. But that's certainly something that you spent a lot of time on in the last year and a half.
5 years. Right.
Well,
when you think about where it began, right?
Right, but I mean, it's in the final stages.
Right.
And in the last year, it's been in the final stages.
Right.
But it actually really began in 2009 when you think about it. So that's 8 years ago.
Right.
That's got to be exciting for you to have watched it from that point to now where it's at.
Right. You look at where you think opportunities are. You think about what's the right way to organize, what's the right way to manage, what should come under town umbrella, and then to go through a process of mediation, cost setting, working with attorneys, working with tax folks, finance folks, engineers, and then ultimately to bring that to town meeting, which is your legislative body, and to get that much of an overwhelming approval kind of ratifies some of the things that you've been thinking in when you're presenting your information, presenting your data.
No, it's got to be exciting, because you got to from a thought, from a concept, to almost completion is a long trip,
Long road.
And to do that through a committee. A lot of people don't appreciate what it's like to move a committee in a direction, to get a committee to agree to do something, to do that not just with one mind, but with a committee. It's very difficult, so it's not an easy thing to do.
No, and it was made up of really multiple committees or boards, right? When you think about it, when you think about Brian, Dino, Mike Walsh, new people added, some people leaving, and to have that continuity of thought is actually pretty fulfilling for me, because
Absolutely.
I've been there throughout the process.
No, that's got to be exciting. Absolutely fantastic.
What are some of the other priorities you have? You've got 2 years and 3 months left on the board. Lately, you guys have been talking about quality of life a lot, quality of life in Milford.
Right.
Making sure that places aren't run down, that neighbors don't have to put up with an eyesore next to them for 3 years.
Yeah, so the chairman's kept us pretty focused on quality of life issues. It's been something that's been important to him. The fact that it aligns with Mike Walsh and myself is really making, really a bonus, right? Because everything seems to gel. We're focused on the same
Because all
types
three of
things.
you
In agreement.
care about this.
Right, it's something that's important to all of us. And the chairman, through the setting of the agenda, through the preparation for his meetings, sets that tone. And he's done a good job doing that. I know that when we're working with town meeting, legislative bodies, when we're working with council about homes, buildings, focusing on those, the ad hoc downtown revitalization, it just feels good when you finally get it to town meeting. And again, you're ratified again in your thought process that certain buildings would be better off either parking lot, green space, or a combination of the
Yeah,
both.
and actually the idea of taking those buildings by the ad hoc downtown committee actually went very quickly. I mean, less than a year before I think they came up with an idea to form a committee. They came up with that idea. You guys advocated for funding, you guys meaning the selectmen. The FinCom supported you. It went to town meeting, they supported you. And 2 out of those 3 properties are already owned by the town, with the third, you guys are negotiating, I
Right,
guess, on when he gets out.
Yeah, when he's able to move his furniture out.
Right, but I mean, we're talking about less than a year, which in government time is fantastic.
Short time.
Right.
And the other thing
In
is-
private sector, that would be quick.
Well,
Yeah.
the other exciting, the other thing that I think is extremely exciting is that for years, the revitalization of downtown has been a discussion point.
Right.
But now there is action being taken. A committee has been formed. A committee's taken action and making recommendations. And so now it's going through a process that clearly is going to be, I think, successful in any action it takes, because it's now involved in the community and it's a process now, not just a bunch of people sitting on a road.
Business owners.
And what I like is
Yeah,
that
it's great.
committee, most if not every member of that committee is an owner of a business downtown or property downtown. So they're really acting, they know the problems
Right.
firsthand,
They've
because they're
seen them.
there.
They look at them.
It's not like, Joe Blow up on the Purchase Street on the Hopkinton line saying, I want to be on a downtown committee. It's the guys invested in downtown.
And if you look at the last acquisition of 3 buildings, they were either largely dilapidated, falling apart, in the last case, just boarded up for 20 years. And you also look at what's happening in Central Street. People are making huge investments to businesses. And so we're working with owners, talking about what they can do to make it look better. We're working with town meeting to see,
Yeah.
how we can expand parking.
So it's not just a discussion of a few people sitting around a table having a beer. It's really a governmental process which is inclusive of the community,
Right, and
which
it-
is going to move the agenda in the right direction, whatever that may be,
Right.
and in the right way.
Well, what would you like to see downtown? I mean, it's going to take a while. I mean,
Well,
it took,
nothing's overnight. Yeah.
the face of retail shopping, I think, has changed twice since the downtown business that we knew 30 years ago went. I mean, first the malls came in, now they're sort of going out to online. And now people are looking for more specialty shops and things like that. What would you like to see downtown at? I mean, I remember 30 years ago walking downtown, well, yeah, actually it might be longer, but let's say the 1980s, the place was thronged all the time. There were, a dozen small stores where you could buy anything, eat anything, a movie theater. What do you like to see return there?
When I look at towns that have done a good job on Main Street, you're right, that evolution of brick and mortar downtowns versus large box stores and malls, evolving to now where the internet is putting pressure
On the
on
malls.
the large box stores and malls. People are wondering what they're going to do with their malls. I think that's opportunity for small boutique businesses.
Absolutely.
Right, where you're not going to order online your bakery items, right? You're not going to when you look at craft brewing and different things that are coming into vogue. There's opportunities there where people are not going to order those items online necessarily.
Or a place where you can go sit down and have a dinner, a nice dinner in a quiet restaurant,
Right.
as opposed to going some big place, something local. And the other thing is, I believe that that second story on Main Street has got, the profile of that has got to change. There's got to be some living, it's got to be living space, some living space
But
there.
the town meeting's turned it down twice.
But I don't think that I personally don't think that the proper group was put together to move that agenda forward.
I would agree.
And I think now that group is put together, which is going to show the benefits and the advantages to doing that stuff.
Well, I don't know if they'll get there, but they could. And you know, ultimately, at the end of the day, we've got to think about a total solution.
Right.
You can't think about anything in a vacuum. You can't think about living quarters and mixed use on Main Street without talking about parking.
Right.
That's exactly what Will said in our last show.
And he's focused on, you guys are focused on that the first step, is the parking. Absolutely logical.
Right. When you look at 89 Main Street, Restaurant Tutoria,
Great restaurant.
89, great restaurant, fantastic business, offering something
And very
that's-
hard to park around.
that's different
Right.
than what somebody else may provide just down the street.
Right.
And that's a credit to the owner, Michael, and his staff for creating demand for, you know, something unique, that different
Right.
restaurant experience.
And there's no reason why you can't have several more of those somewhere in the town.
Offering something else. And
Something different, right.
Right.
Absolutely. But parking becomes the one
Primary challenge.
challenge. But it sounds like that you're moving in that direction to resolve that issue.
I think some of that's the case. One thing you're not able to do is buy up properties to create parking. And one of the reasons for that is if you buy a house, you get 4 spots, right? It's not necessarily enough land for parking, you know, to justify the cost per you know,
Yep.
car.
Right.
But in special cases where buildings are boarded up, they're falling apart, we know it's contiguous properties adjacent to our parking lot. There's a very unique opportunity that presents itself that we went after, and town meeting agreed.
I also think people have to get used to the old model. You know, they're so used to driving up to a strip mall, parking in one of, you know, several dozen spaces, and there is where you're going to eat, shop, whatever, that they have to get used to the older model of here's central parking and you walk 2 blocks to Restaurant 89.
Right, and you look at mixed use as an example.
Right.
As Al talked about, one of the things malls are looking to do is mixed use. One of the, you know, next generation thought processes in mall living is you have people living above and having a place to go at night for dinner, go to the bakery.
Right, that's what the younger
You
generation
look at the
wants.
Natick Mall as a classic example of that.
Right.
Right.
Now
They just unfortunately priced their condos up
well,
too high.
they
to the
did the
market.
same thing in Westboro, but that particular mall hasn't been diverse enough to offer the things that they need. You know,
Like
that
Natick.
right.
Oh, actually, I was with somebody who looked at living in that place. That place is full up. It's more of a drive-through shopping mall than a shopping mall, but the apartments with it filled up rather quickly with professionals. They were mostly unmarried people. An awful lot of people in that Westboro Plaza were young doctors coming out of the UMass environment who just wanted a place to stay, you know, before they got married or when they retired. And they sold out pretty quickly. The problem, I think, with the Natick collection, when they called it that, was the condos were $1 million and they were Natick. I mean, the Boston Seaport might be able to sell a condo at $1 million, but out here, that
Yeah, I
was
think that went bankrupt.
way
and
overpriced. It went
ultimately-
bankrupt, and they all went for about $200,000-300,000.
Right, they went
And-
for less than,
And they were all occupied, but that was a fairer price than $1 million.
right.
You also have to price something for the market,
And the market tends to set the rate.
That's right. That's
Right.
the normal thing is, you know, the buyers will set the rate. You know, if it doesn't sell, the price will drop.
I want to switch gears for a minute. It seems like in the last year, you've become a lightning rod when anybody wants to criticize the board. They sort of single you out. And I can think of some things, or the whole board. There's a letter to the editor in the last couple of months, for instance. The night you guys voted to set the salary for the water commissioners, somebody said, well, it's obvious there was an offline discussion because there was no discussion that night. Yet I was at meetings, 3 or 4 meetings going back 2 months before that, where you discussed it. I mean, do you guys have secret meetings?
I think what people fail to understand is continuity meeting to meeting.
Right.
Right, so we can discuss we can discuss salaries as an example. And
Let's go back to that one. You wanted a certain salary. Michael Walsh kept saying it was too high.
right,
Did you guys meet offline and say, let's meet in the middle, or did you just say, I'll come down closer to his level and see what happens?
exactly. That's exactly what happened. I know if I reduce it, there's a likelihood or a chance that we can gain support. So you reduce that number, you find out where the tipping point is, and the board can vote unanimously or not to support that new number. That new number was reduced from what I would have liked to have seen, but that's the art of government, right? You compromise, you move from your number, you don't stay stuck in one spot, and what you find is, once you offer up a number that's something less, you find your colleagues able to jump on board, and then you have a unanimous vote.
But there are no midnight meetings to plan out the marijuana ballot question?
There are not, because frankly, I'm asleep long before midnight and away quite a bit, so.
Well,
That's good.
my joke is, every meeting that I know you have had is televised, and I'm the only reporter sitting there at most of them.
Yeah,
So,
if people
unless
wanna-
you do this, in executive session, which you can't really.
Can't do it.
No, there's regulations there.
I don't know when these meetings are taking place.
Well, so all people have to do if they want to see it is go to YouTube on community television.
And then
They
watch
can
it.
see any one of our meetings and the history, watch successive meetings, and see how a discussion evolved. And I think they're more likely to get it. When you take a meeting in a vacuum, I don't know that you get the whole picture. So if you happen to see one of 4 meetings, then you're not going to
You get
completely
1/4.
understand it. But the beauty of letters to the editor is it's still America. People still get to write what they think, regardless of whether it's true or not. It's okay because people get to voice their opinion.
But does the criticism bother you?
Not at all.
You can tell it's made his hair gray.
Yeah. No, I didn't get into this. I didn't get into, trying to work to set public policy or to change the way government operated under any false impression that it wouldn't be without criticism. So I take that criticism, I understand it, I process it. I think criticism is healthy. And frankly, I'm critical of myself. I'm critical of government sometimes in general. But I think there's ways in which we can always get better.
Well,
So-
you've told me time and time again, you're a process guy. I know you're a quality control engineer
Right.
by trade, but you've said to me time and time again, I'm a process guy. And
That
I
means
noticed
things evolve and things get better.
you look at processes when people come before the board. You always look at how do we get here? What's the way we do this?
Well, the trick is, and you're very skillful at it, is to find that spot where everybody gives a little and everybody gets a little. That middle ground where you can move the agenda forward, and it's that middle ground. That's where a good public official works, in the gray area.
Right.
Policies are set for black and white, but an elected official has to sit right in that gray area and find that spot.
Find a sweet spot.
That sweet spot,
And an example of that was, recently passed marijuana legislation.
Yes.
In the November ballot, it provided an opportunity for, one, people to speak out and say whether they wanted to decriminalize marijuana and to what extent they would be willing to make it legal. From there, it also had language in the provision that allowed for communities to opt out. And so, as public officials, we're not always clear where the community standard is. I've had 2 occasions since I've been selectman where votes and positions I've taken had the opportunity to go for ratification to town-wide votes.
No casino, no
The
marijuana shops.
Casino and marijuana. And in both of those, I was fortunate enough having to be out on the front edge of that, making decisions, deciding where I think we ought to be, and also seeing where the voters were. And I was fortunate enough to had my decisions and my thought process ratified by the voters.
But yet, when it went back for the actual zoning article, that was amended to allow the existing businesses in town that do testing or other
Growth
things,
or- yeah.
the grow area and the testing company, to remain, which the original ballot said no. So people evolved and said,
Well, remember there were there were several different thresholds there.
right,
So, for example, you can get a simple majority in a townwide ballot initiative, and the
Right.
vote will carry. When you need 2/3, now you have to rethink how you might present that article in a way that which 2/3 can carry. A supermajority is not an easy thing to do.
Right, because I can tell you, going into that meeting, before that compromise, neither side had the right number of votes.
Yeah, and I thought that, to be honest with you, I thought that compromise between the growers, testers, and Milford Cares was, I thought that was thoughtful. I thought it was an approach that could work. It allowed both sides an opportunity to take something they could.
Right, and even more, it got both sides talking to each other,
It did. It did.
which they hadn't done before that. I don't think the businesses
they had.
understood the political thing.
They had.
Well,
I don't think there was complete understanding, but there was certainly Mike Dungus and others that certainly talked with Milford Cares and
Yeah.
met with Milford Cares.
But I think, from my perspective, it was really good to see people hammer out a compromise and get something that makes everybody happy.
It was, and I would
'Cause
give
you don't get that in Washington today.
I would give John Fernandez a lot of credit as a representative for the businesses and putting people together, putting the right people together.
John's always been good at that.
Yeah, and a lot of weekend meetings, a lot of telephone calls, and they were able to put something together.
No, that worked out well.
Yeah,
And you may still have to have one last ballot, though, to ratify the zoning that the town meeting passed, because that wording was slightly different than the wording at the last referendum.
Correct. So right now we're waiting for the Attorney General. And
To
where the
tell you
Attorney
if you need that.
Right.
So if the Attorney General's office says, you're all set like now, it's done and it stays the way it is.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that because, Jerry is of a mindset if Attorney General ratifies.
That's
then,
Town Council Gerald
yeah,
Moody.
Jerry
Yeah.
Moody, Town Council, is of opinion that if the Attorney General ratifies, they'll give guidance. So we'll get that understanding in the next week or so. I don't have it tonight as we speak.
Right, and
We
what'll
haven't
happen
received
is
it yet.
eventually they'll say what to do and you'll do it.
Right.
But your idea all along was to get out in advance of the date when, not you personally, but the board's idea, was to get out way in front of the date when applications for these shops are due, by trying to give clear guidance early.
Yeah,
Is that right?
It is, and part of that guidance came from MMA, the Massachusetts Municipal Association. They have newsletters, they talk about these types of things. And what they do is they give guidance on policy and when towns should consider making votes. And they were saying act quickly rather than later.
Right,
So
whereas
their
I
guidance
think-
was,
Whereas Mendon, for example, did a moratorium
So
saying,
did Upton.
we want to wait until the state commission comes out with its guidelines.
So did Upton. Did the same thing.
Which
Yeah.
actually I think still puts them behind the 8 ball, because
Sure.
you could be waiting, but I could put in an application.
Absolutely.
yeah, so you have to be careful, right?
Right.
I just looked at MMA guidance and direction and said, they're saying move, we should be moving.
Right, okay.
They study these
What-
things much more than me.
On a different note, what things are coming up before the board over the next year or 2 years that really you want to get involved in? Obviously, you talked about the quality of life as a continuing issue. What other major challenges? The water company will play itself out and get done at some point. What other major things do you see coming before the board?
Well, I see continued quality of life discussions. I see task force discussions, how to retool that, how to make sure there's cooperation between departments so that there's an understanding. If we're going to visit a home or an area that's had complaints to the building department, how many police department activities have they seen? How many calls, how many issues might they have seen? How many health department issues, how many calls have been into the health department, so that we know not just anecdotally from one department, but rather coordinating all departments to bring in all that data.
Well, as you know, I'm a frequent police and fire scanner lister,
Right.
and I can name 4 or 5 properties off the top of my head that I hear them going to all
Absolutely.
the time.
You talk to the
But-
dispatchers,
But I
they know
also
who they
know
are.
the town is doing things on each and every one of those. It's just the legal process takes forever.
It can.
In these cases, it has.
And to that I say it's worth it. And you have to have patience, because some of the quality of life issues we're dealing with, they weren't created in a day. They're not going
Right.
to go away in a day.
But I don't think people understand also, this is not like Russia or China, where the state government can wave a magic wand and say, change this tomorrow. We do have due process
Yeah.
and legal rights here.
And that's a good thing,
Right.
right? It
Yes.
protects you and I as much as it protects anybody else. Sometimes it overprotects. We always feel like it overprotects unscrupulous landowners and absentee landowners, but it is blind in that regard.
Right. You've had some changes in the building department. Is that department now staffed enough to handle the task force issues and things like that? You have a brand new commissioner, a brand new local inspector. Is that it? Is that department up to staff, or do you see any more people, or just, reprioritizing what they look at?
Well, certainly there's reprioritizing, right? We don't want to go after those issues, say, sign issues, with the same rigor or the same priority as we might overcrowding. I know that some neighbors can tolerate a sign in their neighbor's yard much more than they can tolerate 20 or 30 people coming and going from a 3-bedroom or a house, or,
Or 20 bags of trash breaking open every week.
Right. So we want to prioritize.
Or rats in the neighborhood.
We want to prioritize based on risk and based on impact to neighbors. Really, that's what they should be doing. And so I don't want to give greater priority to the louder voice who doesn't like signs, and is troubled by the yard sale signs on posts. While we want to get to those and we want to pull some of those down and we want to manage those consistent with our bylaws, they're not going to get the same level of attention from our building department per the direction of the selectmen.
Right.
Well, there's the trash issue and that kind of stuff also means that the Board of Health has significant authority in those areas too. And so the Board of Selectmen, I'm sure, will be working. You have a great Board of Health, excellent Board of Health. So working with the Board of Health will resolve a lot of those issues too.
Yeah, so there's little things that you bring up. A water company is going to take a great deal of time and will continue to take a great deal of time until we close that. Last week I brought up the topic of closed containers for recyclables. One of the challenges I see around town, certainly I see it on my street and I see it on other streets, is the newspapers and the light materials blow out of them.
On a windy day. It happens every town. I mean, I see on the day you put out the plastic bottles, I live on Route 140, and you just see plastic bottles up and down the road because people overpiled their container and they just blow off.
But it's not happening in towns that have the closed containers, the bigger containers.
Right.
Well, that's what Upton did. We have those for
makes sense.
$35 or whatever it is. You get a container which is a little smaller than the trash container, and it's recyclable, and you throw your stuff in it. Now that's what I have. Because I run a business, I have 2 of them, and it works great.
Great idea. You don't have to worry about it blowing in your neighbor's.
And the other thing, the trucks come rolling in, they stick out the grabber, zing, it's all done, and it's a piece of cake.
They don't have that pickup in Milford, though.
We do. That's how they pick up mine.
Okay.
They pick up the same way.
Yeah.
The arm just dumps it, flips it, puts
Done.
it down, gentle as can be.
Yep.
So
Rather than have and the nice thing about it is what they usually give you is these little blue containers that strong winds come, it drives in the street, someone drives over it, and wham, you got this flat thing.
That's exactly what we have and what I see all the time.
So we've got to do something about this.
And what's your Board of Health, what we did as a Board of Health, we went out and bought 60 or 70 of them.
Buy in bulk.
Buy in bulk, you buy
Sell
a
'em to
bunch
people.
of them, and then people come and they give you whatever it was, $35 or $38, and they buy them.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other major concerns? We're starting to run out of time, but any other major concerns you see coming up?
I would say we're focused on Main Street. We're focused on quality of life in the neighborhoods. I think we'll continue to work that, make sure that the water commissioners get a great start, building commissioners, new commissioners get a great start, and have the appropriate direction and priorities. We're looking at all boards meeting as an example.
That's
January,
that's a great idea.
All boards meeting where we talk about priorities, best practices, where we can help one another. Are there speed bumps, impediments that we can remove? Other departments can help. I think is a great way to just have the dialogue, and at the same time they get to find out what their elected officials' priorities are, and we can modify those as time goes by. You should be able to see those priorities borne out, and you should see the fingerprints of the priorities and the strategies go throughout the entire process of town government. You should see it in your budgets and your budget planning, your capital improvement. You should see your strategy play out within your budgets and town meeting actions.